Hi, everybody. This is Doug from Four Winds. I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. We've got about 75 people in the room, so unfortunately I had to mute everyone. If you have questions, we'll put the questions in the chat on the right-hand side of your screen in the GoToWebinar interface. So we have a number of people from Four Winds that are upgraded to the panelist status. They can jump in and answer your questions in the chat if you have any during the session. Some of the questions we might start talking about as we go along, and those will just become part of the session. We want this to be interactive, so please do chime in with any questions that you have in the chat. I want to introduce you to Rajiv Shenoy. He's here in Denver with us from Virginia. We thank him very much for coming out to do this in person with us. He's the CEO of Orca TV. And my name's Doug Chase. I'm the Director of Product at Four Winds Interactive. And we're just going to introduce ourselves briefly, and then I'll let Rajiv take it away. I came from where you're sitting. 3 years ago, I was at the University of Michigan as a systems administrator and project manager, and I managed that digital signage rollout in 2007, 2008, where we went with the Four Winds product. We went through an extensive RFI, RFP process. We looked at 45 products. We wound up with Four Winds, and then I liked it so much that I asked him for a job. And so 3 years ago, I joined the Four Winds team. Previous to that, I managed the digital communications network at Buffalo State and had a number of other roles there. So I come from the higher education world, and I love this company because we are so engaged with this market, and we take so much feedback from our higher education customers. Before this call, we were just talking about how much we enjoy working with the higher education customers because they're so unique, and you give us such great feedback, and you're engaged in events like this. I was really, really encouraged that we had over 150 registrants for this session, and 87 people actually showed up. So that's a really, really good rate. We're really excited to do this today. So I'm going to hand it over to Rajiv, and he can introduce himself, and then we'll start talking about the topic today.
Thanks, Doug. Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for your time. I'm very, very excited to be here. I actually met Doug at EDUCAUSE, and since then we've been trying to figure out what's the best way of kind of partnering to deliver the best services for you guys. I started Orca when I was actually a sophomore at Johns Hopkins, where really our main focus was to engage the student body with digital signage. After graduating, my parents were like, you have to get a job. So I worked on Wall Street for a year, absolutely hated it, started taking sick days to kind of pitch what we did as students to other schools. So since then, we've grown to about 6 campuses. We won the state of Virginia RFP, and I'm really excited again to kind of walk through what we've learned over the last 3 years, and then also what Four Winds and Orca are doing together to benefit the university community.
We have a few specific goals for today, and we welcome you to take it in other directions if you want to, but we have 4 sort of typical things that we find as endemic problems in higher education with regard to digital signage and digital communication. So we're going to go through those challenges together. We'll talk about how we can increase the return on investment for your digital communications money through student engagement, through what Rajiv is doing in aggregating content, and how Four Winds and Orca can help you manage those systems. Rajiv has a lot of really compelling stuff to say about metrics, analytics, and having tangible return on investment, and data that you can show your administrators and directors to prove the return on investment for this solution. And finally, another thing that Rajiv wants to talk about, and we'll go through at the end of the session, specifically deals with how we maximize the use of the technology. A lot of customers we see don't fully take advantage of 100% of the functionality that we provide. So we want to talk about how you can make sure that you're using your systems to the best of their full capacity.
So the first thing we'll do is we'll kind of identify some of the common challenges that we've been seeing at universities. So the first one is limited student engagement. So a lot of times we've seen campuses will tell us, you know, the technology is awesome, but we really need some help getting the student body to actually stop and look at these screens. So we'll actually spend the majority of our presentation talking about student engagement and generating some long-lasting excitement around digital signage. The second one is underutilized technology. As you all know, Four Winds has been around a lot longer than I have, and they developed some really, really cool stuff. And we'll talk about how we learn from the students themselves and what their demands are, and how Four Winds can kind of meet those demands. Then the third one, which is really interesting, and I learned this probably last year, but digital signage, as sexy and cool it is not really a core technology for a university. It's not really their learning management system. But because it's so in the face of the public, it is still extremely important. So we'll talk a lot about how we manage the time constraints for the universities and work with them to, I guess, increase their bandwidth to fully utilize the systems that they have. And then finally, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about how, again, through increasing that bandwidth of the school, we also save costs to the university. So I try to represent this in a graphical form. And the first thing we've noticed is with student engagement, when the project is new and the screens are fresh and on campus, the students are really engaged. And there's actually a lot of excitement for the first semester. It peaks. But then as graduation nears, there's a steady decline of how excited they are about the signage. Then the summer comes and it pretty much plateaus where there's very little engagement. So generally before we're on campus, we're seeing about 3 to 10 ads a month or pieces of content. When I say advertisement, I mean pieces of content displayed on the screen. So I'll talk about how we kind of change that. The second thing I noticed, which is kind of funny, because when I was a student, I don't think I gave the administrators as much credit for this, but administrators are very in tune with the student body, and they generally replicate the student demands. And so you'll see that there's a slight lag to it where the administrator realizes that engagement's going down, and they themselves pay a little bit less attention to it. But the third piece, which is really fascinating, and something that Doug and I have been spending, again, the last couple of months talking about, is while the engagement's going down and it's becoming less and less of a priority, it's still a decent amount of workload for the campus administrators. For example, they still have to manage content. If a screen goes down, they still have to manage the technology. I was pretty shocked with how many presidents at universities say, hey, the screen is down, what's going on? Even though they don't really understand the back end or anything behind it besides the front end look and feel. And then finally, this whole space is growing very fast, especially with bring your own device and students using their iPhones and their Droids, et cetera. Technology's been improving almost linearly over the same amount of time. So we'll talk a lot about how through Four Winds and Orca, we could best utilize that technology. So our first goal is how do we get students engaged over long periods of time, and how do we overcome the transient nature of the student body, right? So when summer comes, the excitement's gone. How do we get them back to be totally excited about this sexy platform on campus? So the first thing we learned as students, and what we do now as a business, is you have to be in constant contact with the students and the student leaders and the community in general, and it really does become a full-time job. And so with that, a lot of it is increasing awareness. So Four Winds has a great platform that accepts pretty much any form of content, but students don't know that. So most of the time, they're submitting PowerPoints or Word documents with just text. And over time, especially with this YouTube generation, we found that the students are first and foremost in love with videos. So I'll talk a lot about some of the videos that we get and how we aggregate those videos. It's pretty neat how savvy students are. So since it's mostly administrators on the phone, you should check out animoto.com. It's a free resource for creating pretty swag or cool videos. But again, students are really engaged with videos. Photoshop, PowerPoint, statics, and text. This is kind of, we have data behind it. I think 92% of the students we survey prefer videos. And they consider PowerPoints too much like class, so they generally try to have animations with their PowerPoints. But again, I think content is the king of all of this. And again, we'll come back. If you guys have questions, we'll come back. We're going to try to get through most of these slides. In terms of aggregating content, so once the student body is aware of how to submit an ad and create an ad, we create these web portals where it gives a lot of information to the students. So how to create an ad, we have templates and things like that that they can use, guidelines as to what's appropriate and inappropriate. We also have a list of all the screens on campus and their locations. And hopefully you guys can see this, but we have an ad submission page, very simple PHP form. In a minute, we always get the question, well, how do you vet content? That'll come up in a second. But the student or the community member puts in their name, the affiliation with their school, the @.edu email address, group name, the name of the event, and then right here where it says Screen Network, we allow the users to actually choose where they want to advertise. So at George Mason, they have 4 satellite campuses, or 3 satellite campuses in their res halls. So the students can say, oh, sweet, Aziz Ansari is coming on campus. We want to submit a college-wide message to all the screens across all 4 campuses. But if there's a career fair just for Prince William, they could click Prince William and it'll always show on the 10 screens there. At smaller schools like Johns Hopkins, we created networks for the gym, the library, and the dining halls. So if Pilates class is canceled, they could advertise just in the gym. But if the gym is closed, they could click all 3 networks and, in essence, advertise across campus. They choose the file, they upload it, and they hit submit. Now, no content automatically gets posted to the screen. Instead, what happens is 3 emails get sent out, 1 to the end user or the content submitter, 1 to a staff member on campus, generally the person who's in charge of uploading content, and then 1 to my team at Orca. And 99% of the time, we actually get good, positive, clean content. An example that I always use because I think it's funny, at Pace University, a student submitted a piece of content that was approved by the university for sex ed, but it had a bunch of floating condoms in the background. Really, really smart ad. He did it in Adobe After Effects. I simply hit reply all. I was like, Mike, thanks a lot for the ad. While it looks awesome, condoms are deemed inappropriate. Can you please replace it with something more copacetic? Within like 2 minutes, he replied back to all, replace all the condoms with hearts. And Janelle, our university staff, was involved, but she didn't have to do any of the help desk or any support like that. And then we took it and put it up on the appropriate screens. The second part of this is, more often than not, we'll get a message reply all from Alana and say, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. My end date's actually the 16th, not the 17th. Can you please fix it? So there's a very easy way for us to go into the database, fix it, and have it deployed on all the 4Win screens. Now, the neatest thing I think we've done is a lot of students complain to us early on saying, oh man, I just missed the video for the basketball team ad. Now I have to wait in line to see it all over again. We have a current ads page, which is actually our most visited page on all of our campuses, where there's a graphical representation of what the ads look like. And we're still upgrading this to make it a little bit cooler, where you could click a play button to watch the men's basketball team video. But again, it's an easy way to get the information to students on their iPhones, their iPads, or while they're at their desktop. So the reason why it's working is, I call it the celebrity effect. It's really corny, but it works. The idea is that if students see themselves on these screens, they take a much more vested interest in it. They tweet about it. They Facebook message each other about it. My favorite example is at Hopkins when we were actually students. The long story short is, the screens weren't very popular to begin with. Like the first month, it kind of failed. But after the intersession, a good friend of mine, Jeff, came to me and was like, dude, Rajiv, we made it to the championship hockey game against Towson, but we've sold 0 tickets all year. Towson sells out every game. Bro, we got to figure out a way to get kids to come out. So if you can picture this, we rented a bunch of video equipment from the DMC, and we videotaped his girlfriend going bowling. In her backswing, another girl ran up, tackled her, screen went blank. It said bowling would be better for a hockey. We had a bunch of hockey hits and highlights, and at the end of it, it said Hopkins versus Towson, 7 p.m., be there. And word of mouth really spread it, and they sold out. And so then the baseball team said, well, why can't we do something like this? The lacrosse team, which is big at Hopkins, Coach Petromala started submitting content. And then the neatest thing to me was professors started creating videos on their research for summer internships. So again, they like to see themselves on the screens, and it kind of goes from there. So we do random surveys of student body, generally somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 students a year. And we found that 94% of students watch our screens daily. 80% of them remember our ads. 80% of them said they were more likely to attend a campus event, but 70% of them actually did.
Rajiv and I talked about this yesterday. I think that these numbers are really powerful. Like, we don't have a comparator chart that's from a non-Orca installation, but if you think about your digital communications and digital signage network, I would bet that the numbers that you would extrapolate for your network would be lower than 94% that would report that they watch the screens daily, that they recall ads, that it's really impacted their likelihood to attend an event. I mean, Rajiv's techniques here have been really, really effective in getting people to be more engaged with the screens. And the story that he's telling about having more faculty engagement, more administrator engagement because of more student engagement is really compelling to me too.
Yeah, and there's just a general sense of buzz on campus, which I always love. Like another story that's great for me was a student at George Mason created a senior project for a full-length movie. And so he created a 30-second trailer, and he emailed me afterwards being like, Rajiv, thank you so much. Because my trailer was displayed on the 50 screens around campus, which I find very fascinating, is only 54% of students said they would use their cell phones to interact with content on the screens. And I'll spend some time later on what we mean by that. But freshmen and sophomores were much more in tune to doing it than juniors and seniors. So there's definitely a trend moving towards bringing digital signage to mobile devices. Mason, it's a great example of the celebrity effect. It might be choppy because we're doing this over WebEx, but hopefully you guys can see it and hear it. So I love that ad. Kevin was the one who made it. He later told me that they had the best turnout for their beach retreat. And one of their challenges was everyone thought the Catholic ministry was just for Catholic students, but it was actually open to everyone. And then later this past year I found out that not because of this ad, but Kevin became Student of the Year, I guess. So he was kind of the epitome of building his own brand on campus. And you'll find that students are extremely savvy with that these days, with creating their brand through Twitter, through Facebook, etc. And so in tune, what I found is that the universities also are getting better at creating content, specifically the digital signage. So here's an example of Spirit Fridays, which is, I guess, part of the Mason culture. And then this is probably one of my favorite ads from Hopkins that we had recently, where a faculty member needed help creating content. We put him in touch with a student, and this is the type of ad that we got. And they've created like 4 or 5 similar ones.
This really looks amazing in person. Rajiv has been so successful in getting this great content from students, and I don't know how he does it, but it's some kind of magic formula he's got for getting students to provide this awesome content. And that's really the most powerful thing about today's talk is that the screens aren't any good if there's not fresh content on them, if people aren't engaged with them, if they're not telling the right story about your brand. And that's what kind of Rajiv's value proposition is here, is that we can go get that content for you and get students engaged. But if you take nothing else away from this session, it's that students are out there and they want to be involved with this stuff. You just have to make it happen.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned too is that students want responsibility, but you can't always trust them with it. And so there's a healthy blend between saying, hey, let's get your content up here, but then also having a reliable platform that could serve them. Because once, and again, I graduated a couple of years ago, but once exam period comes around, I don't care about anything besides my exams. So a lot of it comes through with I guess, harnessing that energy and excitement, but also doing it in a way that keeps the integrity of the institution. So and I'll show real data. So again, if you remember the original graph, what we've been able to demonstrate is an extremely heightened sense of student engagement. In a couple of slides, I'll explain how we do that. And so that's our big chunk of value, is the idea that we're getting so much more engagement with the student body. So one of our investors, he really pushes the idea that, Rajiv, all of this is nonsense unless you have an accountable and measurable system. So I'll spend a couple of slides explaining what we demonstrate to the universities on a monthly basis to prove that this is actually working. So in that sense, what we've learned is that, again, the administration is very in tune with the student body. And so digital signage over the course of a year becomes less and less of a priority. But again, as I mentioned, the workload still stays fairly heightened. So the first thing we do is for schools who are interested, we do all the content, technical, and help desk support. So that emails, uploading content onto the appropriate 4Win screens, creating the funnel workflow web portal to make it more efficient.
And we stay involved. So Rajiv's team would do the frontline tech support. If they need to escalate it, it goes straight to the service provider, or we'll route it to the right person on campus if it happens to be something that somebody on campus has to take care of, like a LAN issue. We also have an offering to have an on-site tech come and repair the screens. There's all kinds of options around that.
Totally.
But Orca handles the front line of that support, so that's taken off 4Win shoulders, and it can be taken off of the university's shoulders as well.
Yeah, and it's simple things too. Like we'll put stickers on every screen that says, "Hey, is something not working? Email us at masonads@gmu.edu." And when I started the business, like, oh, this is a simple idea, but it's awesome how many students respond to it. Where we'll get email saying, "Hey, our ad date is wrong. I don't know who posted it from our group. Do you mind if we submit a new piece of content?" So things like that where we work with the student body, and actually not just students, we focus on students a lot, but just the community in general. The second thing we do is we focus on aggregating the content. In a second, I'll show you our actual numbers. We also do a lot of emergency alert integration. So 4Winds has an awesome back end for doing emergency alerts. We kind of handhold the school to fully utilize that technology, but also create a redundancy through Blackboard Connect, E2 Campus, Rave, Roam Secure, etc. And then finally, we have analytics to demonstrate the cost savings, and we have an optional advertising platform, which I will get into. So every month we provide this dashboard. I can't go through too much detail in it now, but my two favorite slides, or actually, why not? So this slide on the top left shows the cyclical nature of campus. But you'll notice that we're averaging well over 100 pieces of content a month, with some months breaking 200.
And this particular graph is powerful to me because you can see that between the first and the second year, engagement increased, right? The green bars are higher than the gray bars on average. So that's powerful, right? Instead of having the engagement go down, the engagement has increased in the second year.
Then the next thing is the portal visits. So we track how many people go to each site, the number of unique and repeat subscribers. So every semester we throw a pizza party where we'll invite random people, but also people who are using the system to get feedback. And oftentimes we'll hear things like, oh, it'd be really cool to get touch screens on campus, or during the Super Bowl, it'd be so sweet if we could stream the Super Bowl and all the screens. I'll tell you about another one in a bit as to some of the cool stuff that we've done. We also know where ads are being placed or pieces of content, so which campus or which gym or whatever it is. So that way if we have more intelligence as to where most students are engaging with the content. And then finally, we can tell who's advertising, whether it's contractors or student groups or departments. And all of that can be customized to each campus. So we've learned very quickly that each campus has a very distinct culture. And so we tailor our services to the culture of that university.
Yeah, this is a really great slide, Rajiv. And it shows that the analytics you can get from a service provider like Orca are really meaningful, right? It's difficult to aggregate this kind of data yourself, so having somebody do this for you is great value. I noticed that a couple people had their hands raised in the room, and if you have a question, it would be great if you could type it into the questions area of the screen or the chat. We have everybody muted because there's so many people on the line. We have almost 100 people in the room. So if you have a question, please pop it into the chat or the questions section.
So one of the coolest experiences I've had so far as an entrepreneur was I sat down with the chief of staff of George Mason, and I just straight up asked him, I was like, can you explain to me from your side what it would look like? And so we kind of did a back of the envelope where, again, this is an anecdotal campus. He said, all right, let's assume that the upfront cost for capital and TVs, et cetera, is $60,000, and then you have an annual campus-wide license. He was like, generally, we stop at that point. But in reality, you almost need a full-time equivalent to manage content, help desk support, et cetera. Then the second part of it is you'll need a full-time equivalent IT engineer. So the actual recurring cost with benefits is almost $170,000 a year. And that doesn't include things like continuity plans, training, the student aggregation piece. And our goal isn't to really, our goal is not to replace anyone or to take over jobs. It's really to work with the university to create more of a student experience, if you will, and work with the people who are already in tune with the 4Winds system to fully utilize and optimize the technology. And then in terms of advertising, it's an optional platform. Most of our state schools have opted into it. Our private schools have not done it so far, but it's an interesting option. We have a huge range. One campus we delivered 10 grand back to them last year. Another campus 48 grand. It just really depends on the size of the institution. Our biggest thing is, first of all, we're very in tune with Coke campus versus Pepsi campuses, banking rights, et cetera. But Verizon's a good example where we don't just accept national content and that's it, because then the students don't see any relevancy. So Verizon will throw up their latest Droid ad and then follow it up with, hey, text now to get a 20% discount at this local store. The U.S. Army and the Marine Corps are probably our biggest supporters. But again, we're getting a lot of powerful national brands to advertise with us on a local level. And a lot of the revenue that we share back with the school, we've seen them use it for different things. One school uses it to go back to student groups for them to attend more events. Other schools are using it to buy more equipment and to do more enhancements. But it's really up to the university at that point with what they do with those new funds. We do all of the ad sales. We do all of the marketing. We're getting a little bit savvier with it, where Verizon can buy the gym, let's say the sponsor the basketball team, and advertise across campus. We'll create like one media kit, but that usually happens later in the program and not from the get-go, because it gets a little complicated. And again, we'll have time to answer any questions at the end. So if you remember the priority beforehand, that's what it looked like. And what we've noticed is, without really doing anything, the administrators react to the increase in student engagement and with the increase in excitement, and it becomes more core to what they're doing. And again, it's not something that we really force. We just see it naturally happen, where almost all of our campuses are adding new screens. They're adding new technologies.
In the right places.
In the right places, yeah. So a lot of times early on, you'll throw these things up in very transient entrance ways and things like that. But students will say, oh my God, we spent so much time in XYZ Lounge. It'd be so sick to have a screen there. So the university is allowed to use that type of information to better utilize their resources. Then the other thing we've been able to demonstrate is a significant change in the amount of work there is. And it's not that it goes to zero, but it looks more like this, where in the beginning of a program, there'll still be work. Over the course of the semester, it significantly goes down. But then to help launch the new year is the way we always position it. We're going to need help from the administration, but then it's basically cyclical with the student body is the way it is. And again, this is kind of our representation of what it's been for the last 3 years.
And it's not that we're reducing the need for any of your staff or resources. With a group like Rajiv's, you're making them able to do their jobs well, right? And they're able to concentrate on strategic elements of the project instead of having to do the day-to-day of the system, to put the content up on the screens, worry about screens that are down, do that sort of boring stuff, right? You're able to concentrate on the strategic.
That's exactly. And we found that a lot of our contracting officers, if you will, or partners at schools, get really excited. Like, there's a lot of cool product development that 4Winds and even we're doing. And again, because we're in tune with the student body, the administration is in tune with the body, it's more of, hey, can you guys do this? Oh, absolutely. Let's figure out a way to do this together, rather than your day-to-day be, oh, my God, one of the screens is down, or, oh, the student wants me to post something tomorrow. This is such a pain. And it's not that. And that's just kind of how it's transformed, if you will. So finally, fully utilizing the technology. So again, as we mentioned early on, this is kind of what it looks like. So now all of a sudden you have technology growing. Our goal is to say, all right, without increasing the workload, how do we bridge the gap between all these technology enhancements and the amount of work that the university is putting in? So the first thing we do is social integration. So I'll start with the left-hand side, interactive polling. This is one of the coolest things we've done. So one of our students, he was the student body president, came to me and was like, hey, Rajiv, it's a huge pain to campaign across campus. No one really pays attention. How awesome would it be if each candidate could give a 1-minute speech and take over the entire screen? So we went through the appropriate powers. We created a 1-minute speech for, I think it was 5 or 6 candidates. But to kick it up a notch, if you guys watch Emerald, that was Courtney, sorry. But yeah, to kick it up a notch, what we did was we did a texting platform like in American Idol. So at the end of the 5 speeches, kids could text in and see a live poll of who they wanted to win. We got over 2,000 text messages. The kids totally loved the interactivity of it, and it really felt like it belonged to the campus, right? Like these screens were the students, by the students, for the students. We've done calendar reminders, so registrar's offices love this, where at drop, if you want a reminder, text 30364 with registration, and on the 24th, it'll send you a text message to remind you. On the right-hand side, this is a little bit more interesting. Students really want to integrate with Facebook and Pinterest and Instagram and Twitter, and the universities very against it for obvious reasons. But with 4Winds technology, vetting Twitter is fairly straightforward so that there won't be any inappropriate tweets on the screen. But Facebook's very difficult, I'll put it nicely, to integrate with. We have the ability to do it, but vetting the information is hard. YouTube is also another one. So if the university has a YouTube channel, so we're seeing a lot of marketing departments are very, very savvy with this. So we could integrate and automatically pull YouTube feeds to show up on the screens, and it looks like extremely beautiful on the screen.
Rajiv mentioned that 2,000 students had voted on that interactive poll. When I was running the system at Michigan, if 2,000 students had done anything that was related to my signage network, I would have been super excited. So that's the special sauce that he's bringing here.
And again, I think a big part of it is if the student body sees themselves on the screens, it creates that. I've heard Jumbotron effect is probably more accurate. Like you see yourself on the Jumbotron, you're not famous, but everyone talks about it, right? And everyone gets excited about it. It's the same principle. Like it's the chance for the kids to see their face on 50 screens or 60 screens across campus. On a side note, we get some cute requests too. Like one student emailed me saying, hey, I really want to ask out this girl. Can we please put this video on the screen? It was adorable. We didn't do it. But we get interesting feedback. Another one said, oh, I went to a Wizards game last week. We saw a kiss cam. How cool would it be if the screens could take a picture of a random student and say, hey, congratulations, you won a $5 discount at Starbucks. We obviously didn't do that for privacy reasons, but the kids are thinking about it. They're getting excited about it. They want to help and improve the platform. And the main reason why I started this business was to kind of continue doing that as a real person and not just a student. So in terms of emergency response, 4Winds has a sweet system where you could take that SMS platform, whether it's Blackboard, Connect, or whatever you have the screens ping that feed every 60 seconds, go through a decision and say, if there's an emergency, take over the screens, have a timeout, and then go back to regular programming. Or if there's no alert detected, just go to the regular screens. What we help do is create redundancies on a location basis. So if you have 4 campuses, help you create a redundant network. So no one has to go in and type in a message, but a redundant network. Or within a campus, have a specific emergency platform for each building on campus.
This isn't 100% technically accurate, Rajiv. But we did develop the emergency notification feature in the 4Winds product in conjunction with the University of Michigan. So we're really proud of that. It was developed with higher education in mind. So what Rajiv's team would do would be set up the emergency alerts for you. But honestly, with our technology, you'll be happy to hear this, Rajiv. Once you have it set up, it's set it and forget it.
Perfect.
There's no manual intervention needed except for the person at Department of Public Safety who's triggering the event with whatever solution.
Awesome.
A rave or a Mir 3 or E2 campus, whatever. So we'll have to revise the slide a little bit. But
cool. No, that makes sense. I mean, this is kind of how we're doing it now with other platforms. But we also have the ability, like Doug was saying, to create one university-wide message. The other thing that we try to focus on in conjunction with this is creating like a university brand across digital signage. 4Winds is really good at creating that front-end experience, if you will. But part of this is being able to identify these screens and know that, yes, it's for content and it's for advertising my student event, but it's also for emergency alerts if, God forbid, there's anything bad to happen. So what we've been able to show is that without increasing any of the workload, we're able to bridge the gap between technology and the amount of work the administration has to put in. And what's awesome about Four Winds is they really focus on building that technology. I really focus on how to implement that technology, especially from the student demands perspective. And then with the administration, we kind of create like a tripod, if you will, of partners where we say, okay, this is what Four Winds can do. The administration says, all right, this is what the students want. And then Orca works with you, the students, and Four Winds to implement it seamlessly and keep the student body engaged.
So Orca's continually up on what the latest Four Winds release is, what new functionality and features have come out. And if somebody on campus was to get a request from a student for something complex, something that was really edgy, they might not know that it's possible with the solution. So by being in tune with the students, the Orca team is able to say, yes, that's possible technically, or that's not possible, and they were able to execute that as well.
Right. So to kind of summarize, the way it works is the schools are saving by basically paying us to increase their bandwidth for managing digital signage. Then local and national brands are also paying us to advertise, and that revenue gets shared back with the school. And that's what keeps it free to the student body. So the students and the community get advertised through our portals. We vet the content, make sure it looks okay. We then distribute it to the targeted Four Winds screens across campus. The community can interact with the content with however they choose, using their cell phone or just by watching it. We then take a bunch of this data, make some sense out of it, and provide it back to the school and to the advertisers, so that way there's a demonstrated return on their investment. So I was an engineer in college, and I'm still kind of nerdy, and this is kind of a closed loop. And that's kind of what we focus on, right, is saying, all right, you have the technology. How do you create a loop, if you will, of proving that this stuff is working?
Some of you might have tried to get into subsidizing your digital communications network with advertising, and I've personally seen that that's really challenging to do if you feel like that's a good fit for your institution. And so what Rajiv's offering here is to make that simpler, to broker that relationship with the advertisers, and that's extremely powerful. We've seen that because you can't deliver, or it's difficult to deliver really good analytics that advertisers will accept, that they're reluctant to buy your ad inventory. So solving that problem is a really huge step forward for us.
Yeah, and also there's really two sides of our business model, if you will. One is the cost-saving measure to the university, where we focus on the student engagement and everything we've talked about. And then the other side of it is, well, now that we have the students engaged, like Doug was saying, we can now prove to advertisers that they're getting an ROI. So one of my favorite anecdotes with that is the University Mall Theater, so the local dollar theater, was losing business to the AMC that came across. So they did a text-in where on all the screens it said, hey, text in now to get a free movie ticket and 10% off popcorn. And I think they had 260 kids text in, and then like 140 actually use it. And so again, there's a lot of ways where local advertisers can connect with students in a new medium. So to kind of summarize what it looks like, before we were on campus, student engagement is not cyclical. It kind of just goes down and stays down. We're able to bring it back up and have a long-term engagement strategy. The second one is the administration follows suit. So while the priority originally follows suit with engagement, it stays the same way. And like Doug very nicely put it, the administration becomes much more strategic with the investment they made with the Four Winds technology, and so you're able to fully utilize the platform that you've invested in without increasing your workload. So you're still very involved, but again, from a very high level, managerial level, where you're telling me what to do and we execute for you. And then finally, we grow with the technology. So the engagement stays in tune with the technology. The priorities stay in tune with the technology without increasing any of your workload. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. That's me and that's Doug again. Those are our email addresses if you have any questions or if you're interested in some of our next steps. But I believe we have plenty of time for some Q&A.
I replied them to all, but we can talk about them. Yeah. We got a bunch of great questions in the question section of the GoToWebinar. application. So I'm going to go through a few of those. And if you have more questions, go ahead and type them into the chat box or into the questions box there. I'm a little bit reluctant to unmute everybody because there's 100 people in the room, but if we want to do that, we can go ahead and do that also. See, some of the better questions were about kind of specifically about the 4Win solution. A couple people asked whether we were going to go into any detail about our product today, and that wasn't part of our plan. If you want to get more information about the 4Win's product, we're more than happy to engage with you individually. And we've got lots of resources on our website as well. So if you want to learn more about what we're doing, then you can reach out to us afterwards. As you see on the screen, both of our email addresses are available here. Someone asked about how we add additional information to an event location, like a link to the campus map. So this is something that maybe we didn't touch on in great detail during Rajiv's talk, but when you implement the 4Win solution and the Orca solution, which is purely services, you don't lose control over your network. So anything that's technically possible with the 4Win solution can be implemented either by you or by the Orca team. You can reach out to them and say, we want to do this, and then they'll make it happen. Or you can use our interface, our content management platform, to make those changes on your own. So anything that's technically possible with 4Wins is just easier with Rajiv's team involved. Okay, there's a couple people with their hands raised, so I'll unmute you individually. Let's give this a shot. It's risky, but let's see what happens here. Linda Motter, I'm going to unmute you if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
The college pays Orca to manage their content for them, and then local and national brands advertise, and that ends up on so you know, somebody could advertise just on the, according to them, just on the basketball TV, and then that money comes back to the college.
But they have touch screens all over the place.
No, these aren't.
So I felt like we were eavesdropping there for a second. I'm going to unmute John McCoy. John, do you have a question? John seems to not be there. The session was being recorded. A few people have asked about that. We're going to reach out to you individually after the session, and we'll share the link to the recorded session and give you more information about how to engage with us. Does Orca design the layout of the signage screen based on the content that's to be played? That's optional. They can, if you want them to do that. They're not going to make any choices that would impact the branding of the signs. In most cases, they probably would not change the layout of the screen. But if that was a specific request that you had, they can develop as many templates as you want, or you can develop your own templates in the 4Win's product.
Also, what we do is before we launch, we usually have like a kickoff, and in that kickoff we review guidelines and appropriate content. If you want to change the look and feel, we could bring 4Wins because they have some great creative designers who are phenomenal at this. But basically, the three of us or a group of us could sit down together and, I guess, optimize the layout for different types of content. So, for example, what we're doing at current schools is we have two panels, if you will, one for landscape, one for portrait, because early on students most of the time repurpose flyers on the screens, but then as they get more in tune with the software and what it's capable of doing, they start to upload more videos and animated content. So again, if you're happy with where you are, absolutely keep it. If you want to change, all of us could sit together and figure out what's that best change and how to make it look and feel.
Cool. Dave asked if this is available for other industries outside of higher education.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll be upfront. We haven't done it outside of higher ed, but we have a very strong team of content managers. We're very in tune with 4Wins. So if you're in hospitality or any other industry, we'd be happy to figure out what your needs are and figure out a solution for it. So I'd be extremely open to talking to anyone outside of education on how to manage this.
Thanks. John asks, how do we track student engagement? So can you talk about how you gather that data?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. So the first one is when they upload content, it basically goes into an Excel file, and it's a bunch of data, and we make sense out of it. The other one is we hire student ambassadors where, like at Longwood University, they go out and they do surveys of students of random people. We also do surveys through the screens where it'll say, hey, do you remember what this ad is about? Text A, B, C, or D. If you get it right, you get invited to a pizza party. At the pizza party, we generally have somewhere between 100 and the biggest one, I don't know if we'll ever be able to do this again, but the biggest one we had was 400 people. It was crazy. But we get a lot of information from that. And they fill out flyers for us and surveys for us, and we populate that. To Doug's point, we've never done like a third-party survey. But again, we try our best to be analytical because then we could improve our platform. So that's kind of how we aggregate it. It's pretty much our core business is to figure all that stuff out.
How many students generally respond to one of your surveys?
Depends on the size of the school. Our larger campuses, like one of our schools has 35,000 kids. I think our survey was over 1,800. At our smaller schools like Hopkins, we did one of like 400, 350, 400.
But
it's sizable, yeah. I mean, again, like we're not going to get to Arbitron type studies where we'll calculate the optimum dwell time of a screen. We find that to answer that question, we cap our dwell time to about 12 to 15 minutes, depending on the school. And for schools who opt into advertising, 50% of the time goes to the student body and to the university. 50% of the time comes to Orca to sell ads. And quite frankly, if we ever sold our entire inventory, I'd be having someone else on this call. But yeah, so generally we're running a 10-minute loop, 12-minute loop. And the other thing is I think there's a question on scheduling content. All the content automatically gets taken down, and also that happens on the 4Win side and on our portal side. And we can help you with all the scheduling. You could do it in-house. I mean, we're very flexible with that. I think to Doug's point earlier, our main focus and our true value add over and above the content management and the cost savings is the ability to engage the student body.
Dave's asking if we can show how this would be implemented within the 4Win software. It's an interesting question. But there's nothing to show, right? Because Rajiv's team is using the same interface that you would have on your campus. They have access to the Content Manager product just as well as you do. If you choose to give up access to that, then they can take it over 100%. But we don't want to take away any control that you have over your network either. We just want to add the value that Orca can provide.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that we've done in the past. So one, if a university has a lot of local content managers, we generally come in and focus more on the student populated areas, so like student unions, residence halls, gyms, etc., and we manage the majority of the content there. But if a history department chair wants to manage his screen, we're very open to letting him, not letting him, but I guess partnering with him to manage his screen. More often than not, what we found, though, is the head of the history department chair comes to us and says, oh, my God, I just saw the Game of the Week ad, which is every week at one of our schools they submit a video for a sports program. He's like, I want that ad on the screen. And actually, you know what? I'm really only putting 5 PowerPoint slides a month. I'd love for you to manage our platform, and we'll do it for them. So we're really aware with the culture, I guess, on campus and the way people want ownership, and we embrace that. I mean, again, our goal is to get students to watch your screens, not really take over all your work. So while we have a standard package to work with universities, realistically at all of our schools right now, we've customized our solution for what their needs are.
A few people have asked about the cost of the Orca solution, and that varies depending on the size of your school. There's also a bunch of different options, so we'd be happy to talk about that later, but we can't sort of tune that to everyone. However, I will say that on Rajiv's slide, he's showing that for a medium-sized school, kind of an average implementation, you're talking about spending between $200,000 and $300,000 a year on a digital communication solution. In some cases, it can be a lot more than that. So having somebody mitigate the amount of workload can eliminate half or more of that cost. Probably a great deal more than half, to be honest. We noticed that as a related point, at Michigan, by doing a campus-wide implementation of the 4Winds product, instead of doing it piecemeal from department to department, we saved $400,000 in the first 6 months in a rough calculation. And this was just during the pilot. So over time, if you find that your campus colleagues have more than one digital signage solution on campus and something that's not sort of filling the need as like an enterprise solution. Another great way to save money with digital communications is to go to a campus-wide solution that's managed all from one point. And then adding the Orca solution on top of that just saves more and more money. So that's about as close as I could get to detailed pricing information today. But we'll be happy to talk to you individually and get a sense of what your needs are, and then we can give you very detailed pricing after that.
And I also see that there are a couple of questions on whether we could conduct surveys and things like that on behalf of the campus. I'd be more than happy to. We can't just give out our surveys because they are fairly proprietary, and we have spent a lot of time and money on developing them. But again, I'd be more than happy to come on. I can guarantee you it would be less expensive than an Arbitron or Nielsen's, but we can still give you some accurate information. And so we'll be in touch, I guess.
I'm looking here in the questions list to see if there's anything we missed. Rajiv, do you see anything that we...
I haven't seen. I think we've covered most of it. Also, the panelists did a really good job of answering a lot of these.
Great. Well, we have 5 minutes left. It's a miracle. I really appreciate everybody joining today. We were shocked by the amount of reaction that we got to the mailing and the amount of attendees that actually showed up today. So thank you, each of you, for coming today. And please don't hesitate to write to both of us if you want to talk about what your next steps might be. If you're interested in the Four Winds product, if you need help with the Four Winds product, we are happy to train you and get you engaged with Rajiv's team as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're very open. I'm very excited. We've been getting great response from students and administrators, and I'm very excited to partner with Doug and the Four Winds team. They have a sick product, and we're happy to help and kind of get going on some of your campuses.
Cool. Thanks for coming out, Reggie. Really.
Thanks, guys. This was fun. And again, feel free to contact us if you have any questions or concerns. And some of you have already emailed me, which is cool. So I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
We'll get back to you this afternoon, I'm sure. So thanks again, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon. The recording will be available shortly after the session, okay?